Hey everyone, I would like to take you to ancient Egypt today and make a little cruise on the Nile River with you, going through the pages of this book. These are aerial views of Egyptian monuments, and I'm going to comment on these views for you. If you've been following my videos, you know that I'm a big fan of ancient Egypt, so I'm happy to share a little bit of that with you. I went there about half a dozen times, and I had the chance to visit most of the monuments we're going to see. You will also find in the description of the video other videos I made related to Egypt, about the pyramids or Cleopatra recently. So let's get started. The book is not only about ancient Egypt and monuments, so I'm going straight to the section about the antiquity. And we're going to begin here with a view of one of the most relevant pyramids in Egypt. This is a remote site called Dashur, and this is one of the most ancient pyramids still in existence. This pyramid is called rhomboidal, which means that the slope changes about halfway to the top, maybe because the builders needed to accelerate the construction. But as I explained in the video about pyramids, that was a very important step towards in the evolution of pyramid building. And this is the most famous site in Egypt, maybe, the pyramids of Giza, with these three very famous pyramids, and on the right page a view of the Sphinx, which happens to be the biggest monolithic statue in the world. These pyramids are among the most ancient monuments in the world. They were built during the Old Kingdom, which was in the 3rd millennium before Christ. And you know that traditionally the history of Egypt is divided into 3 kingdoms: the Old, Middle, and New Kingdom, which were periods during which the country was unified and relatively pacified, as opposed to intermediate periods during which it was invaded or split into various kingdoms. There is also a legend saying that the Sphinx had disappeared under the sand, and it was rediscovered by a pharaoh who was sleeping and would have heard the voice of this creature. This is another very famous and important pyramid, and one of the first too. This is the site of Saqqara. This is where one of the first known pharaohs, called Djoser, I spoke much about this pyramid in particular, in the video about the history of pyramids. And he was one of the first to build such a massive funerary complex with a pyramid and temples, buildings around. This is about a few miles from Cairo, still in the north of Egypt, close to the site where the first capital of unified Egypt was built, a city called Memphis, which was just at the beginning of the delta of the Nile. another small pyramid. Actually, there are hundreds of them in the country. Only a few of them are famous and impressive, but there are plenty. And now we are starting to head south, and we're going to see the first temples appear. They date from various periods, but the best preserved temples are from the New Kingdom and the Ptolemaic period. This is another thing I told you about in the biography of Cleopatra, and once again you will find a link to it in the description. And we are now arriving to Luxor, which was the site of the capital of Egypt during the New Kingdom. And here the big photo is a view of the Valley of the Kings. In the New Kingdom, pharaohs no longer built pyramids as tombs. The tombs were dug into a mountain on the west side, the west bank of the Nile. This was supposed to be the land of the dead. The sun disappeared in the west. And for generations, tombs were built, were dug, and magnificently decorated. Many of them were rediscovered in the 19th and 20th centuries. Now we have a view of this temple called the Ramesseum, still on the west bank in Luxor, which was the funerary temple of Pharaoh Ramses II. Very few remains of this magnificent temple. It was destroyed by floods. But there are still these two statues we saw on the page before. I'm going to show them again. Here they are. And as you probably know, in the New Kingdom, the very last period during which Egypt shined as an independent country, Ramses II was a brilliant pharaoh, conquering parts of the Middle East and making Egypt the biggest and the most powerful country of his time. Now we have a view of a temple still on the west bank in Luxor, built by the woman pharaoh Hatshepsut. This was still during the New Kingdom, before Ramses II, and Hatshepsut was a woman, the daughter of a pharaoh, who managed to take and keep power for several years, and her reign was associated with a period of peace and commercial expansion for Egypt. Roads towards the Horn of Africa were reopened, and Egypt imported products, especially frankincense, coming from the south, from Africa. And we have to imagine that this place that now looks very dry was covered with vegetation and was probably like a vision of paradise for the contemporaries. Now we are still in Luxor, but we are crossing the river, crossing the Nile, and going to the east side with a view of the temple of Karnak. Karnak was, and I think remains today, the largest religious center in the world. It was like a giant temple to which generations of pharaohs added new parts, obelisks, new buildings. They made considerable donations to this place, which was during the New Kingdom the holiest in Egypt. And even though there are buildings that are better preserved than Karnak, this is particularly impressive to visit. This is another view of this same temple. Temples back then were very important, religious of course, but also economic centers. This is another temple in Luxor, the Temple of Luxor, which is smaller, even though it remains impressive. And it was connected to Karnak by a long road with statues on each side, and on religious ceremonies there were processions from one temple to the other. So I was saying that temples were very important economic centers. They owned land. The clergy was very powerful, including politically. And sometimes when pharaohs were a bit weak, politically when they were too young, the real power could be in the hands of the priests, especially during the New Kingdom, the priests of Amun. That was the most important god in Egypt during the New Kingdom. And here we have another temple, the Temple of Horus in Edfu. It's a city south of Luxor, very well preserved because this was built during the Ptolemaic period, the period after the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great, when the sovereigns of Egypt were of Greek origin. Now we keep going south, and we are reaching the island of Philae in Aswan. Aswan is the last big city on the Nile when you go south in Egypt. And this particular island was dedicated to the cult, to the adoration of the goddess Isis. There was a temple of Isis, and there is a kiosk that was built in the 1st century, the one you see on the right. This is known as the Kiosk of Trajan. And now if we keep descending, we are reaching the site of Abu Simbel, which is probably the most famous monument left by Ramesses II. Actually, the site we are seeing now is not the original site of Abu Simbel. The temple, or the temples, because there was this small temple dedicated to the queen on the right, and the largest one was dedicated to the king and other gods, were built a little bit more south, but the entire site was moved when a dam was built in Aswan to bring power to the south of Egypt. The temple would have disappeared when an artificial lake was created. So in order to preserve it, it has been cut stone by stone and rebuilt to on a higher location where it would not be destroyed and would not disappear under the waters. So at the entrance of Abu Simbel, you have massive statues of the pharaoh, and inside the temple is not extremely large. It was entirely dug into the mountain. there was a large room with columns leading to a smaller room with statues of gods. I think we are approaching the end of the section with monuments. So that's gonna be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this little trip. I apologize for letting you without a new video for 2 weeks. It's just that I've been extremely busy, and I'll tell you why in an update I'll make in a few weeks. To keep it short, I created a business. I started it with a partner a couple of months ago, and it keeps me extremely busy, but I remain committed to this channel, and I hope I can quickly return to a weekly upload of a new video. My next video is going to be about Alexander the Great. This topic won your votes in the last survey I organized, and I'm going to have another guest in this next video. I will make it in English, in French, and in Spanish as well. Thank you very much for your attention today, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.